The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It turned the roads of western Germany into rivers of mud, and the rivers into swollen monsters that swallowed bridges, trucks, men, and sometimes hope itself. In March of 1945, the war in Europe was collapsing inward like a dying star, but inside the American command tents, nothing felt simple. Maps were soaked with coffee stains and rainwater, radios hissed with broken transmissions, and everywhere, men waited for orders that changed every hour. General George S. Patton did not wait. He never had. While other commanders paused, calculated, requested clearance, Patton drove his Third Army forward like a spear thrown by history itself. His tanks clawed across frozen fields. His infantry marched with blistered feet and hollow eyes. They were exhausted, but they were winning. And Patton smelled the end of the war the way a predator smells blood. Trier lay ahead. It was one of the oldest cities in Germany, older than Rome's empire in the north, sitting near the Moselle River like a locked gate into the German heartland. The city mattered not just symbolically, but tactically. Roads converged there. Rail lines passed through. Whoever held Trier controlled movement deeper into Germany. Officially, Trier was not Patton's objective. That detail did not stop him. On the morning of March 1st, Patton stood inside his command vehicle, boots planted wide, binoculars pressed against his eyes. The sky was low and gray, like the ceiling of a prison. Tanks idled behind him, engines rumbling like impatient beasts. His chief of staff, General Hobart Gay, stood beside him. "Sir," Gay said carefully, "Bradley's orders still place Trier outside our operational boundary." Patton lowered the binoculars slowly. "How far is Trier from us?" 20 miles. "And what's between us and Trier?" "Scattered German units. Some Volkssturm, maybe remnants of the 7th Army." Patton smiled. "So, nothing worth stopping for." Gay hesitated. "Sir, Bradley didn't authorize." Patton turned sharply. "Bradley is fighting the war on paper. I'm fighting it in mud and blood." Silence followed. Patton looked back toward the distant hills where Trier waited unseen. "I'm not going to let the enemy keep a city just because a line on a map says I can't touch it." Then he snapped his glove tight. "Order the 4th Armored forward." And just like that, the dice were thrown. By noon, Patton's columns were moving. Shermans rolled through rain and smoke. Half-tracks splashed through villages that had already lost their flags, their windows, and their illusions. German resistance appeared in fragments. A machine gun nest here, a Panzerfaust fired from a cellar there, but nothing could stop the momentum. Patton rode near the front, helmet strapped tight, scarf whipping in the wind. Every mile felt like a challenge to the entire American command structure. And he loved it. Inside a nearby headquarters miles away, General Omar Bradley was not smiling. Bradley was the opposite of Patton in nearly every way. Where Patton burned, Bradley calculated. Where Patton shouted, Bradley listened. Where Patton believed in destiny, Bradley believed in discipline. Bradley's operations officer entered his tent holding a damp dispatch. "Sir, 3rd Army crossed into Trier sector." Bradley looked up slowly. "Repeat that." Patton moved without clearance. "He's pushing armored elements toward Trier." Bradley removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "God help me. That man will win the war and ruin the command system doing it." Another officer added, "If Patton takes Trier, sir, he'll be deep inside territory assigned to another corps." Bradley stared at the map. He already knew what Patton was doing. He also knew why. Patton could see opportunity the way gamblers see cards. He saw empty German roads, broken units, fear spreading faster than orders. He knew if Trier fell fast, the Germans wouldn't have time to regroup. But war was not only about speed, it was also about control. Bradley leaned back. "If Patton takes Trier without orders," he said quietly, "every general under me will think permission is optional. The rain continued to fall. By evening, Patton's tanks reached the outskirts. Trier appeared like a wounded relic. Ancient stone walls, Roman ruins shattered by artillery, church towers poking through smoke. German civilians watched from cellars as American armor rolled past statues that had survived 2,000 years, only to witness their final empire collapse. German resistance inside Trier was desperate, confused, and short-lived. Snipers fired from rooftops. Anti-tank guns barked from intersections. But Patton's men had crossed France, Belgium, and the Rhine. Trier was not going to stop them. By midnight, the city was effectively in American hands. Patton stood near a captured bridge, rain dripping off his helmet, watching his flag rise. One of his officers approached. "Sir, Trier is secure." Patton exhaled slowly. "Good." Then he added, "Now tell Bradley we've improved his map." The message traveled through wet wires and exhausted radio operators. At Bradley's headquarters, the transmission arrived just before dawn. Third Army reports Trier captured. Silence followed. Bradley read the line twice, then once more. Around him, officers waited. Finally, Bradley looked up. He did it. Someone asked, "Sir, what are your orders?" Bradley stood and walked toward the map table. His finger traced the boundary line Patton had crossed like it was sacred ink. He whispered to himself first, "That son of a gun?" Then louder, "He just rewrote the front without permission." Another officer said, "But sir, Trier is valuable. Patton saved us days of fighting." Bradley turned. "Yes, and he also taught every commander that orders are suggestions." Bradley picked up the field phone. "Get me Patton." Minutes passed. Static crackled. Then Patton's voice came through, sharp, confident, already victorious. "Bradley, I assume you're calling to congratulate me." Bradley paused. The tent was silent enough to hear rain strike canvas. Finally, Bradley spoke. "George, what the hell did you think you were doing?" Patton chuckled. "Winning the war." Bradley's jaw tightened. "You crossed operational boundaries without clearance. You took a city not assigned to you." Patton replied calmly, "I took a city the Germans were about to use against us." Bradley inhaled slowly. Then came the sentence that would shake Patton more than any shell. "George, you're going to give Trier back." Patton froze. "Say that again." Bradley didn't raise his voice. "You're going to pull your forces out of Trier and return the city to the sector it belongs to." On Patton's end, silence replaced confidence. Rain dripped from his helmet onto the radio console. Finally, he spoke. "You want me to abandon a captured city in enemy territory?" "After my men bled for it?" Bradley answered quietly. "Yes." Patton's hands clenched. "That's impossible," Bradley replied. "Then learn how to do the impossible without destroying my command." The line went dead. Patton stared at the radio like it had betrayed him. Around him, officers waited. Patton removed his helmet slowly. And for the first time since landing in Europe, George S. Patton did not know whether to fight the enemy or his own command. The war outside Trier was almost over, but the war inside Patton had just begun. The radio went silent, but Patton's thoughts did not. Rain drummed against the metal roof of the command post in Trier like impatient fingers. The city around him was quiet now, but not peaceful. Fires still glowed behind shattered windows. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang once, cracked, lonely. Unsure whether the war was finished or only pretending to be, Patton stood motionless for a long time. His officers did not speak. They watched their general stare at the radio as if it might suddenly apologize. Finally, Patton exhaled through his nose. "Give Trier back." He repeated the words like they were a foreign language. Colonel Codman, his age shifted uneasily. "Sir, Bradley can't be serious." Patton turned slowly. "Oh, he's serious." He walked toward the map spread across a wooden crate. Trier sat there, circled in grease pencil, freshly conquered, still warm with victory. Patton jabbed the city with his finger. My men crossed rivers for that dot. They bled in snow for that dot. And now Washington's favorite general wants me to politely hand it back like a library book. One officer spoke carefully. Sir, what are your orders? Patton's lips tightened. For now, we hold. Outside, American soldiers moved through ancient streets. They searched cellars, helped wounded Germans, gave chocolate to children who looked at them like creatures from another planet. Tanks parked beside Roman ruins older than Christ himself. Patton watched it all from a balcony. Victory looked fragile. Behind the scenes, Bradley's headquarters was boiling. Bradley sat alone after issuing the order. The tent smelled of wet wool and burnt coffee. Maps hung everywhere like the skin of a conquered animal. His chief of staff approached. Sir, you really want Patton to withdraw? Bradley didn't answer immediately. He stared at Trier's position. Finally, he said, George isn't fighting Germans anymore. He's fighting the idea that rules apply to him. Another officer said, But sir, Patton taking Trier saves lives. Bradley nodded. Yes, and Patton ignoring orders risks the entire alliance. Bradley leaned forward. This isn't just about Trier. It's about command. Eisenhower, the British, the Soviets watching every move. If Patton redraws boundaries whenever he smells opportunity, the coalition fractures. Silence followed. Bradley's voice softened. George wins battles. I have to win the war. Back in Trier, Patton was not sleeping. He paced. Rainwater dripped from beams. His boots echoed against stone floors once walked by Roman generals who also thought they were unstoppable. Codman followed him. Sir, Bradley's probably under pressure from Eisenhower. Patton stopped. Pressure didn't take Trier. Courage did. Codman hesitated. But sir, disobeying again could end your career. Patton laughed once. Careers end in offices. Wars end in cities. He turned toward the window. Smoke rose slowly from the edges of Trier. Patton whispered almost to himself. They're already beaten. The only question is how fast we crush what's left. The next morning, a new message arrived. Bradley's tone was no longer calm. Patton, begin withdrawal preparations immediately. Patton slammed his fist into the table. He grabbed the radio. Omar, you're asking me to expose my men while the enemy still breathes. Bradley replied, You're in territory not assigned to you. Patton snapped back. Territory doesn't bleed. Soldiers do. Bradley paused. Then he delivered the part Patton hadn't expected. George, if you don't comply, Eisenhower will remove you. That word hung in the air like smoke. Remove. Patton's face hardened. For a moment, even his anger froze. Is that a threat? Bradley answered quietly. It's reality. The line cut again. Patton slowly lowered the radio. Around him, officers avoided his eyes. Patton whispered they'd rather lose momentum than lose control. He turned toward Codman. Write this down. Codman grabbed a pencil. Patton spoke. We will not abandon Trier to chaos. We will stage a controlled handover. No retreat under fire. No humiliation. If Bradley wants the city, he gets it intact. Codman looked relieved. So, we comply? Patton smiled without humor. We comply. Like conquerors, not clerks. Orders spread. American armor repositioned. Units prepared to shift sectors. Engineers inspected bridges one last time. Soldiers didn't understand why they were moving after finally winning. Some asked their officers, Why are we leaving? The officers had no answer that sounded sane. Patton walked among his men. He saw exhaustion, pride, confusion. A private saluted him. Sir, did we do something wrong? Patton stopped. He looked at the young soldier. No, You did everything right." Then quietly, "Sometimes the war is easier than the people running it." That afternoon, Patton received another message, unexpected. Bradley was coming in person, by jeep. Patton didn't smile. When Bradley arrived, the rain had stopped, but clouds still pressed low over Trier. Bradley stepped out of the jeep, glasses fogged, coat muddy. Patton waited for him near the ancient gate. They stood facing each other like two different philosophies wearing the same uniform. Bradley spoke first. "Hell of a job, George." Patton nodded slightly. "You're welcome." Bradley glanced at the city. "Your men fought well," Patton replied. "They always do." Silence stretched. Finally, Patton said, "So, you've come to take my trophy?" Bradley sighed. "I've come to stop you from becoming bigger than the war." Patton's eyes narrowed. "I became big because the war needs speed," Bradley replied. "And the war also needs obedience." Patton stepped closer. "Omar, history doesn't remember paperwork. It remembers winners." Bradley met his gaze. "And history also remembers generals who lost control of their allies. They stood inches apart. Ancient stone watched modern egos collide." Bradley finally spoke softer. "You think I enjoy telling you no? You think Eisenhower isn't watching us? The Soviets are racing west. The British are nervous. One wrong move and this stops being a war against Germany and becomes a war between allies." Patton clenched his jaw. "I didn't cross half of Europe to become a bureaucrat." Bradley nodded. "And I didn't cross it to become your cleanup crew." Another silence. Wind moved through broken windows. Bradley turned slightly toward the city. "You took Trier brilliantly." Then he turned back. "But you took it alone," Patton answered. "Someone had to." Bradley looked at him for a long moment. Then came the sentence that changed everything. "George, sometimes winning too fast scares the people behind you." Patton felt it land. Not like an insult, like a truth. For the first time, Patton didn't respond immediately. Bradley continued, "You move like the war is yours alone. But it belongs to presidents, allies, politics, and peace that hasn't even been written yet." Patton finally spoke. "My job is to kill the enemy." Bradley replied quietly. "My job is to make sure you don't create a new one." They stood there, rainwater dripping from ruins older than either man's pride. And between them stood Trier, not just a city, but a symbol of how victory itself could divide those who were winning. Patton looked back at his men, then back at Bradley. The impossible order was no longer just military, it was personal. And the consequences had only begun. The night after Bradley left Trier felt heavier than any bombardment. Patton stood alone on a balcony overlooking the Moselle River. The water slid past ruined bridges like history trying to forget what men had done beside it. Fires flickered along the edges of the city, small and tired now, like soldiers who no longer had strength to burn. Patton removed his gloves. For once, his hands were shaking, not from fear, from restraint. All his life, George S. Patton had believed motion was morality. Move faster than doubt. Strike before hesitation could grow. Victory, in his mind, was not just an outcome, it was a responsibility. Every hour saved meant fewer coffins shipped home. And now, for the first time, his speed had been labeled dangerous. Behind the scenes, higher headquarters was closing in. Eisenhower's name floated through every wire, every whisper, every coded message. Supreme Command was watching. Patton knew the pattern. First came concern, then came control. Then came replacement. Codman approached quietly. "Sir, Washington is asking questions." Patton smiled faintly. "Washington always asks questions when soldiers answer them first." Codman hesitated. "Sir, they're worried you're racing too close to the Soviets." Patton turned. "So?" Codman swallowed. "So, politics are now marching beside your tanks." Patton laughed softly. Politics moved slower than my slowest Jeep, but he didn't believe it. That night, Patton wrote in his diary by lantern light. He wrote about Trier. He wrote about Bradley. He wrote about how victory was becoming permission-based. And in a sharp, furious line, he wrote, "They fear success more than failure." Meanwhile, eastward, the Soviets were moving like a red tide. Their armies crushed through eastern Germany, burning, looting, advancing with a different philosophy, not speed, but inevitability. Every mile they gained became permanent in politics, not just on maps. Eisenhower knew it. Bradley knew it. Patton felt it. Every hour wasted at Trier was an hour Moscow gained elsewhere. A new transmission arrived before dawn. This one wasn't from Bradley. It was stamped from Supreme Headquarters. Patton unfolded it slowly. The words were careful, polite, lethal. "General Patton, your operational aggressiveness is noted. However, coalition coordination requires strict boundary adherence. Further unilateral advances will be reviewed at the highest level." Patton read it twice. Then he laughed, bitterly. Reviewed. He folded the paper. Reviewed was how wars died quietly. Outside, trucks were already loading. The withdrawal had begun. American flags came down slowly from buildings they had only just raised. Soldiers rolled cables, packed ammo, moved tanks backward instead of forward. Patton walked among them again. One sergeant spoke quietly. "Sir, feels like we're retreating." Patton stopped. He looked at the man. "No, retreat is losing." Then he paused. "This is politics." The sergeant nodded without understanding. As the handover continued, Patton received word that another corps was moving in to assume Trier. Men who had not fought for it. Men who had not bled for it. Patton watched their vehicles approach from a ridge. He whispered, "Victory is strange. Sometimes you capture it. Sometimes you're ordered to return it." Inside Bradley's headquarters, tension was spreading upward. Eisenhower's advisors were nervous. British liaisons complained. Soviet observers watched silently. One British officer remarked, "Patton moves like he wants Berlin himself." Bradley replied flatly, "Patton moves like he wants the war over." Eisenhower listened quietly. Finally, Eisenhower spoke. "Patton is useful, but he's radioactive." Silence followed.